Did you teach your child how to speak? If you taught your child English, it is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn because we have weird rules and spelling. All this stuff doesn't make sense. You taught your child that. You did. You love them more than anyone else will. You want the best for them. You are perfectly equipped.
Welcome to Live Your Life Out Loud podcast. I am your host, Stefanie Thayer. This is a place for tired and overwhelmed women to gather together. Whether you are seeking or already following God, I aim to bring hope, fulfillment, and purpose to your life. So let's dig in.
Favorite topics today. Wasn't always a favorite topic, but now it is. And that is homeschooling. Should you or shouldn't you? I was one of those people who would see a family, a sweet little family, quite a few children, and the mom was homeschooling. And I thought, that's so sweet. I wish I could do that. That's just precious. But I'm not patient enough. I'm not a teacher. I could never do it. Be really careful what you say never to, because God has a sense of humor. And the things I've said never to, pretty much they've happened. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of how we got there, why we got there, and just some data and points for you if it's something that you decide to do. And if you're like, I don't want to homeschool, just hang out with us a bit, because we're going to talk about parenting and what's your responsibility and how to raise your children up well. There will be a lot of really good nuggets that'll also be for you, not just for homeschoolers. So I have 3 bonus children. They went all to public national blue ribbon schools, very fortunate. And I have 2 that I had to birth, and my husband went to public, actually national blue ribbon schools all the way through his education. I went to private schools until high school, then I went to a public high school. So we had different education ideas. And when it was time for our younger 2 to go to school, the district that we lived in was not a good public school. And even the difference between my youngest stepson and the first one I birthed is 7 years apart. The difference in the education in California by then was drastic. I can say that my 3 bonus children got amazing educations through the public system, phenomenal. They're all very bright. They're all quite different kids. They all did really well in school. I mean, they had struggles like everybody, and they did great in college and now in adult life. They really benefited from that public education. My oldest bonus boy, he was the last year that did not have Common Core, so his SAT test was different. So the youngers have seen a very different scenario. So we actually put the youngers in a small private school, part for faith-based and part for the education. It was only a class size of 15. And my little guys were all boy, just as rambunctious and physical and full energy. They were like full throttle or sleeping or eating. That was pretty much it. There was no in between. I didn't know the difference because that's how I was. And I figured all boys, you keep them alive, you wear them out. It's good. You feed them. And that was true until it came to a classroom setting where they needed to sit still. And my younger started getting in trouble. We weren't sure why. We thought maybe it wasn't enough breaks. I volunteered every Friday in the classroom, all those things. And about March of that school year, he was out in the hallway almost every day. And if you knew this little boy had the biggest smile on his face. He loved people just so well. I mean, he was one of those, I'd take him to the doctor, he'd get his, shot for his injection, and he'd cry for 1 minute, and then he'd be cooing at the nurse. He just has always exuded joy. And I knew something was wrong because he was getting in trouble. And so one day he got sent home. I won't share what he did because that's his to tell. And he he's like 6, 5.5. And he said, am I in trouble? I said, no, you're not in trouble. I need to talk to dad. Because I wasn't going to make a decision without talking to my husband on if he needed to be punished or whatever. And I said, hey, you need to work on this assignment that you were given. That's what the class is doing. And then we'll talk about it when we get home. So he has his little clipboard, and his big pencil in the back. We're at the stoplight. Within 2 minutes, he says, here, Mom. I said, oh no, you need to do the one sentence and draw the animal. Do you understand the assignment? He goes, yeah, I'm done. I said, what? So I take it from him and he's done with his assignment. That assignment was supposed to be the next 2 hours in class. And so I realized, okay, he's not challenged and he'd rather be outside. He'd rather be talking to his friends. I mean, I would too. I said, okay. So when my husband got home, we had a long conversation and I said, he is on yellow or red. I don't know if you guys had that, the stoplight in the classroom, red, yellow, green. Most of the boys were on yellow most days. I remember being horrified the first day. One of them came home with a yellow. And then as I started working in the classroom, I realized all the boys were pretty much in yellow because let's be honest, the traditional school system, for the most part, does not fit a wiggly child. And most boys are pretty wiggly. And so Craig and I, it's my husband, we talked and I just said, they're starting to kill this spirit, this sweetness in this boy. And he's thinking he's bad. And he's not bad. There's nothing bad about this boy. And we had our biggest disagreement that we had had in our marriage at that point. So we were probably married 8 years by then. And so we came to the conclusion that the public school was not safe that we were at. We could not transfer out to another public school. The charter schools that were around were a lottery system, pretty much impossible to get into. And so we defaulted to, okay, we're going to homeschool. And I said, listen, my life is going to be over. I mean, this is the first time because I left corporate life when they were 2 and 9 months old, maybe a year, stayed home. If you've been a mama and you know those preschool, kindergarten, you're driving more than you are home. Like you're never getting anything home. I had the 3 olders as well. I have 5 kids. They all have a different drop off and pickup schedule and every day is different. I don't know why. I think it's just to torture parents. I'm not really sure. And so the joke of stay at home mom, I used to say, it's like live in your car mom. It was not just stay at home. It was mad chaos to keep 5 kids, which we chose. I understand. It's my own fault. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, by the way. Minivan for life. Not cool, but awesome and practical. So we agreed that I would try homeschooling, just the youngest. And my husband was really worried about it because I'm smart. My background's psychology. I worked in project management, statistics, that kind of stuff. I'm not a teacher by trade, which, spoiler alert, you don't need to be, but we'll talk about that. So the agreement we made was that near the end of the year, I would do a national test to make sure that I wasn't destroying said child. So for first grade, which if you don't know, first grade is a big reading year. When I was in school, we weren't really reading a whole lot till like 2nd or 3rd grade. English is my least favorite subject. So I knew I was a little in for it. You give me math and science, you have me outside being physical, dirty, I'm your girl. English, I'll get by. So I agreed with my husband, okay, we'll do this annual testing. So I'm trying to sell it to our youngest kid because he is the most social person on the planet, probably part of why he's getting in trouble. I'm like, hey, we're going to have you be home next year. It's going to be amazing. We're just going to do school Monday to Thursday. Friday will be a field trip day or a free day. It's going to be awesome. And he's like, well, that sounds fun, but what about my friends? Like, you'll still see your friends. By the way, as a side, your children, if you decide to homeschool them, if you decide to have them in traditional, are going to have the behaviors you have. So if you're a hermit and you stay home and you're antisocial, your children are going to be that way. If you're outgoing and you're involved in the community and different activities, your children are going to be that way. It's not the homeschooling or the traditional schooling that causes that in your child, right? So I told him, oh, we'll still do activities. We're a very active family. And he's like, okay. So as I'm saying this, The first one I birthed, who's child number 4, he's in 2nd grade, and he says, Mom, this sounds amazing. I want to be home with you. And I'm like, no, 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 you're doing great. And he is doing great in school. And he's an observer. He's an introvert. He's extremely liked. He's easy to get along with, right? And I'm like, you're doing so good. He goes, but I think I'd really like to do that. I said, well, let me talk to Dad. So my husband and I talk, and he's like, you know what? If we're already doing one, we might as well do the other one. So I said, okay, we'll let you can stay home too. A couple of things I didn't recognize at the time that were huge blessings in retrospect. It would have been very hard to have had one on a traditional school bell schedule and one on the more fluid homeschool schedule, which I'll explain later. But one of the beauties, one of the best things, is that rush in the morning of get your shoes. Where are your shoes? My kids would show up places with no shoes all the time. I don't know if that was your kids, but literally no shoes to school. Your lunch, it's always a rush in the morning. Well, when you homeschool, that's gone. They wake up, you love on them in the kitchen. We can take that time and adapt to our family and how we want to function. Homeschooling looks 1,000 different ways. You don't have to do it how I did it. I want to give you the freedom that it can look a lot of ways. So I didn't know at the time that it would be a huge blessing because my older 3, they were older. We had them half the time. We shared custody with my husband's ex-wife. They had an amazing mom. And so it actually gave us a lot more freedom when it was just the 2 youngers home. I didn't have that rush. And then when the 3 olders were, we would divide and conquer with how to get them because they were at 3 different schools. So when all 5 were in school, we had them at 4 different schools. It was totally crazy. That's what you get having a big family. And as the school year got closer and closer, we were kind of getting excited about this. And the school was, I felt, now targeting my youngest every single day. And it's a good school, arguably. It's a good school. I think a lot of administration and teachers don't know what to do with kids that just don't naturally conform to the sit still, be quiet, certain personality. Traditional school system really suits one learning style, and that's it. And that's unfortunate because there's a lot of different, there's 4 main, but there's a whole bunch of different. And if you're not that learning style, you struggle, and you also often get in trouble when you shouldn't. There is a beauty in the differences that we have. And I have heavy concerns over Common Core, and that's not what this is about, but it's literally trying to teach everyone to think in one way. Well, brilliance does not think in one way. And it's so important that we are diverse and we are different and we bring that to the table because you may think of something that I overlooked and it's necessary, right? Sometimes those that rub us at school or at work in the hardest ways actually are the friction that we need to accomplish the most that we can. So I hope that makes sense. So actually, we pulled our youngest 2 about 6 weeks before school was completely done. Guess what? We still have to pay the tuition, all of that. Best thing we did. And you know what we did? We didn't do any formal class. We started going on field trips. We were outside. We were adventuring. We were going to the farm. We went to the zoo. Everything that you do is an opportunity to learn. So I'm going to transition a tiny bit to, can you do it? Did you teach your child how to speak? I know I have people that listen all over the world. If you taught your child English, it is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn because we have weird rules and spelling. All this stuff doesn't make sense. You taught your child that. You did. You love them more than anyone else will. You want the best for them. You are perfectly equipped. One thing I didn't recognize, and I had stayed home, a few years before they were in school, so I knew my kids pretty well. I had no idea how much more insight I would have on my children when I started to teach them. I could tell when they were engaged, when they were checking out, what was a struggle, what wasn't, when they needed a break. There was so much I learned from them and how to be a better mom to them and parent to them. And I just want to encourage you. Most of you wanted your children more than anything. I know there are some whoopsies and some other routes that we take, but imagine what life would be like without your child, right? You can't. It's such a beautiful blessing. Why would you hand that over to someone else? I'm going to read a part of a scripture to you, Proverbs 22:6. Train a child up in the way he should go. I don't have the rest written down, but I think it's as they are older, as they are an adult, they will not depart from that. It is your job as a parent to prepare your child in their faith foundation. It is your job to teach them to talk, to walk, to interact with people, how to date, how to handle money. All of these things are you. God gave you that child. That is not an accident. Our societies, for whatever reason, want you to hand over all those rights as a parent, the influence, the bond that you have, to a structure and a system that does not care about them in a way that you ever will. And I'm not discounting teachers or administrators. I have wonderful friends that are both. I'm so thankful for teachers, especially coaches. I can think of some in my life that just blessed me. You probably can too. And they loved me, but not like my own parents. And it's to be expected. They're with your child 6 hours a day. You should be with your child as much as possible, right? And it's not to say that to homeschool, you have to be a stay-at-home, that you can't work. A lot of the people in our community that we built with homeschooling, a lot of them worked. And when it's a priority, you will do it. I watch lots of families make it a priority to get their kids to all these competitive sports. That takes more time than it would for you to homeschool. Or you're addicted to the Netflix thing that you watch. That takes more time than it does to homeschool. So let's talk a little bit about when I decided to homeschool, kind of what I did. So the first thing I did was I reached out to a mom that had 5 boys. Her youngest son was very good friends with my youngest bonus boy. And so I asked her, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. What would you recommend for me? And she gave me some great general advice. So there are 2 things that I am going to share with you. For me, I'm a believer, obviously. If you're not a believer, I'm so glad that you are here and that you can learn and reach out, ask any questions if you have. I love people that are seeking. There's so much to know and so much you probably don't know. If you are a believer, this is a must-have. It's called Educating the Wholehearted Child. It's a book, and it is written by Clay Clarkson with his wife, Sally Clarkson, Clarkson. And the subtitle of this is Discipleship, Whole Books, and Real Life, Wholehearted Christian Home Education for Ages 4 to 14. And one of the reasons that my friend recommended this to me, I think, was to get reasoning for why. I mean, I'm honest. I kind of came to homeschooling kicking and screaming. I did not come to homeschooling because that's what I wanted to do. I didn't come to homeschooling doing it from the very beginning, although I did have puzzles out and I taught them their colors and their shapes and all that, right? How to write their name. So you're already doing it. But this really helps with the foundation of what the Bible says our role as parents are. And it's a very good argument for why you should homeschool. Parents purposely keep Jesus Christ at the center of every area of family life. Ephesians 6:4 also says something very similar to that Proverbs I read earlier. Bring your children up in training and instruction of the Lord. I'm going to read a quote out of this book from Reverend Andrew Murray from the Children for Christ in 1887. Parents, the work entrusted to us is holier than we know. The precious instrument, so delicate, so wonderfully made, so marred by sin already and so exposed to its power, is of such inconvenienceable worth. To take charge of an immortal soul, to train a will for God and eternity, surely we ought to shrink from it. But we cannot. If we are parents, the duty is laid upon us, but thank God, sufficient grace is prepared and promised too. If we do but give up our home and our life to God for him to come in and rule, he will himself take possession. By the gentle influence of his Holy Spirit, bow their will to himself. At least in America, schooling was done from home. And then eventually you saw it move into kind of community, someone that was available, sort of like a single classroom, but let's say like in the village in your living room. And then eventually you saw a one-room schoolhouse. If you look at the first curriculum for that one-room schoolhouse, it's called a primer, Primer. I have one. I recommend you look it up. Children would learn their ABCs based on memorization. It's scripture. This country was founded on Christian principles. The people that fled for their lives, for freedom of religion, came here with that as a principle. If you are a believer, it is your job to give your child that foundation, answer their questions, help them. It is not the school's job, and you won't get it in a public school. You may not get it in a private school, and it is not the church's job either. It is your job as a parent. Sure, a church can reinforce it. I think a church community is very important and vital. I'm not knocking a church, but it's not a church's job to raise your child or to teach them those things. And I often hear this argument about, well, if all of our children are not in the public school, who is to be the light? I hear your argument. I hear what you're saying. But let me ask you a question. Would you send someone who is not mature enough, not prepared enough to answer and defend themselves? And I'm not saying that some children can't. They can. Into a lion's den? No, you would not. You would prepare your child as best as you could. You would give them the full armor of God, which, by the way, is also in Ephesians 6, so that when they go out, they are prepared for battle. You don't send a 2-year-old out into battle. You probably don't send a 6-year-old out into battle either. So why are we throwing them to the wolves? And as a sidebar, I lived in California most of my life. I had a great education in California. The education system has drastically changed. It is not here to give your child the best education that suits them. It is here for indoctrination. What is happening with these kids right now, and I know different parts of the country aren't as impacted. I know a lot of the extreme stuff kind of tends to come from California and then move over. So we moved almost 3 years ago. I can tell you from my very close friends that have kids still in the public system in California, the pressure for what bathroom you go into and what sex you identify as and who you want to kiss is way more important there than learning how to do 3 times 5 or how to write an actual essay. It's a problem. That is not the school's role. A school is to teach the basics, arithmetic, math, right? How to prepare them to be an independent adult that adds to our society, that can take care of themselves, maybe to pick a career path. Our school system needs a major overhaul, major. So this was a great read, and I started here because it was, why am I doing it? And then there are some other things on different types of ways that you can do homeschool, what might or might not work for you. I went back to that same mama of the 5 boys that I had talked with before, and I said, hey, what curriculum do you use? And she told me, and she used a unit study, and I really like that. A unit study kind of contains all the subjects sort of together. But that may or may not be a fit for you. And she even said the same thing. And she said, you really need to get this book because it has, I'm going to tell you the book. And now she has all of her stuff online. This is an older book. It's called 101 Top Picks for Homeschool Curriculum by Kathy Duffy, Duffy. If you look up Kathy Duffy now, I think it's 102 or 103, and it's digital. Here's what I love about this book. The front part talks about 4 main learning styles of children and what type of child you may have. So you need to understand, hey, if you're going to homeschool, throw away what you learned in traditional school or however you were raised educationally. Throw away what your kid came home with if you're now transitioning them out. I used to think you had to fill out an entire sheet. I did a ton of sheets because I don't know, that's what they always did in school. You have the opportunity to do it however you want. And you know what? Worksheets may be the answer. I'm not picking on worksheets. I love a good worksheet. My kids do not. So what I recommend and why I love this book so much is it looks at your child's main personality learning style, broken into 4. Obviously, there's more than that. And then also how much time and what you are looking for as a parent. And then it gives you recommendations of what type of curriculum you want. So helpful, you guys. I might tell you a curriculum that's amazing for me, and it might be torture for you and your child. So be very careful just asking what curriculum do you use. There's a lot, more and more keep coming out. There's so many good curriculums out there. So what it talks about is the 4 for children are Wiggly Willy, which my youngest, why we homeschooled, was a Wiggly Willy. I identify as a Wiggly Wiggly. If you can't tell, I'm actually in a wobbly chair as I record this because I am a super high functioning ADDer. Drink my caffeine all day. It's like a superpower. Perfect Paula. A perfect Paula loves a good worksheet. A competent Carl, which my first child I had to birth, number 4 in the family, was a competent Carl. And then a sociable Sue. So you learn about those different styles and you can determine which one your kiddo is. And then it gives you a quiz here for you and what would be a good type. What I love then about the second part is that it gives recommendations. She's reviewed so much curriculum, or what are the best of the best. I caution you, please don't just jump to that curriculum because you can buy just the curriculum. She gives some limited free information, free reviews on the curriculum on the website, and it's good, but it's not enough. You need to learn about what works for you and what works for them. Like, for example, if you don't have a lot of time to teach your child one-on-one, you need something that's a low time commitment. It may be a wonderful curriculum, but if you're having to spend 4 hours prepping it and then side by side, that's a problem, right? If your child hates looking at a screen and you pick an online curriculum and they check out, that's a problem, right? So all these different things to learn. So the different teaching styles, by the way: traditional, Charlotte Mason, classical, unit study, unschooling, independent study, eclectic, and an umbrella program. So as you can see, there's so many different choices. We ended up mostly with something that is called a Charlotte Mason style. So the idea of that, and we did a lot of unit studies, and then we did co-op. Maybe I'll do one on curriculum later if that's something you guys want, but I could spend a lot of time. I could actually sit in the library and show you what we did, what we hated, what worked well, and we changed over the years. We've done it 10 years now. By the time I have a graduate, I will have done it 11 years, and we've done lots of hybrid different things. At this point, my kids are dual enrolled, mostly in college. One of them's about to leave, and then the last one's going to launch soon too. So they've done really well. As a sidebar to that, you are going to get a lot of judgment if you decide to do it. I was told by friends and family that I was going to mess them up, that they were going to be weird. How could I do that? If you and your spouse have talked about it, if you have prayed about it and you get a confirmation from God, you don't answer to anybody else. It is hands down the best thing we did for our family. Hands down. Probably be behind me walking away from corporate life and more money to stay home. It has been very, very good. And one of the reasons I say it has been so good is my husband works non-traditional hours. Sometimes it's really long, sometimes it's not. And so he was so good at being really present with them when he was with them, but he wasn't always, he couldn't go to a parent-teacher conference or show up at like 1 p.m, right? Like a lot of you understand that with traditional work. So if he would get home late And the boys would say, we want to play chess with dad. 9 o'clock. Sure, you can stay and play chess with dad. And they'd play with dad till 11 o'clock at night and they'd fall asleep. We may have had a curriculum plan for the whole day and it was storming outside and really amazing. And they're like, you know what? We want to go in the rain. Cool. We go get rain boots on, we get umbrellas, we play out in the rain for hours, make up little stories, have time. It gives you the flexibility to do the things that you want. So Charlotte Mason, we chose mostly Charlotte Mason, which is learning out of real books. So for example, Charlotte's Web. Let's say you wanted to read Charlotte's Web with the kids. Maybe you would then talk about friendship. Maybe you would then talk about how farm life works. You could talk about different areas of the country for geography and science. Give me a habitat of a spider, of a pig. Hey, how do mammals reproduce? What about the weather? Does that dictate anything? How would God address animals? What would he be saying about slaughtering? Right? All these. You can use the stories to teach. Hey, how many animals were in the barn with Charlotte? What had she written on the web? Can we write that word? Can we write a definition for that word? So rather than taking a textbook, you're taking real life stories or novels or whatever, and you're extracting from it. Really, really cool way to learn. It's what made me fall in love with history. I hated history in high school because it was memorizing dates. I love history now because I get to read the stories and I feel like I'm in it, if that makes sense. It's not for everybody. So how we actually started, some practical tips of what we did. I am a planner, so I loved these 2 books and I read through them and we picked a curriculum. I actually bought a unit study used online. I think it's called homeschoolclassifieds.com. Lots of good used resources. There's usually a used bookstore that has some homeschool things. If you can get your hands on them before you buy them, even better. And so I kind of had mapped out what I was going to do. I knew we were going to do school Monday through Thursday, and Friday was going to be a free day, go out and do field trip kind of a day. So the boys were in 1st grade and 3rd grade when I started. We did almost all subjects together. Obviously, the 3rd grader had to do some harder work. There was some separate between English and math because they were at different levels, but everything else we learned together. They loved it. We made one of our rooms in the house kind of a classroom space. We put up, now they have whiteboard spray paint, but we had like panels that we got from Home Depot. So we had a whole wall that was that. The kids loved that. And we probably would do school an hour and a half a day max. If my littlest was having a hard time, I'd tell him to go run around outside, come back in. I would do math problems with him, and if he could beat me at it, I would go hopscotch with him. All kinds of things. And we would take the day and just enjoy the day. The older one really enjoyed cooking. Well, you learn a lot of math in cooking, so I just let him cook. Oh, it's St. Patty's Day. Let's do a green experiment in the kitchen. Pinterest is your friend. Teacherspayteachers.com. Whew, oh my gosh, so many resources, amazing things. We did lots of STEM challenges. My boys were always building things, blowing up things, whatever. So much fun. Some days were super rainy and I was like, you know what? We'll just pull up a good story from the Magic School Bus and we'll watch that together and curl up on the couch, right? It gives you freedom. It does not take as much time to school as you think. When you are 1-on-1, 2-on-1, 5-on-1, depending how many kids you have, it is much more efficient. A lot of school, unfortunately, these poor teachers have 30 kids in a classroom. Every child is different and they're teaching to kind of the middle child, which that child probably doesn't even exist because all the kids in the classroom are at different points in education, maturity, social skills, all that. You are pinpointing your one kiddo, right? You start to get to know them very, very well. And I tend to be an overcommitter. I'm a recovering people pleaser. And so I knew that it would be way too easy for me to say yes to a lot of social commitments. And so I didn't commit to anything except I wanted one regular weekly outdoor social interaction for the boys to make sure I was getting them socialized, because that was the biggest complaint. Oh, you're going to mess up your kids. They're going to be so weird and unsocial. I hope you've met my children because it's so far from the truth. And by the way, we were very active in Cub Scouts at the time. They were both in Taekwondo. They both did, soccer and basketball and baseball, all the little sports that you would do throughout the year. Very active in our church. So it wasn't like we weren't out during the week at different places, but for them. So I found on Meetup at the time, and there are still on Meetup, there are on Facebook, some local churches you could contact, homeschool groups. And so we just went to a park play date every Thursday. I had zero interest in getting to know anybody. This is how rude I was. I brought a travel chair and a book. I love reading books. And I would bring them to the park and I would sit and read. I'd say hi to the moms and that was it. Wish I could take that back. And I thought, I don't have anything in common with these women. And they're totally an eclectic group. And there were kids there were babies all the way to like 17-year-olds. And my kids are 6 and 8, 7 and 9, something like that, running around. And what I quickly realized is that the kids that were really interested in frogs, that were in the drain thing, they were over there. The kids that wanted to do basketball, they were over there. The kids that wanted to be in the swings, they were over there. The ones that wanted to draw, they were over there. They were separating by interest, not by boy, girl, not by age. Obviously, we're keeping an eye on them. Like the 17-year-olds weren't interested in hanging out with the 4-year-olds, but I would notice like there'd be a 7, a 10, a 12. They're all hanging out together. Then they'd come over and do something else, which is really interesting because as an adult, I don't say, oh, hi, I'm 43. My name's Stefanie. How old are you? Oh, you're 41. Okay, well, we can't really hang out. Nice to meet you. But that's what the school system does. We're artificially separated by our age, right? Where if you can see our interests, as adults, that's where we gravitate, right? Like I want to find some hiking girlfriends. You want to hike? Call me up. You want to sit and go shop all day? I'm probably not the girl for you. I don't like it. It's like a slow torture, right? And that's okay. We're all different. We all like something different. So after about 6 weeks of going to this, I've been listening to the moms and I start talking to them and they were wonderful. And I was really grateful for them. And slowly over time, I built friendships with them. From some of them, we did a co-op. I remember one day I came in and I was frustrated. I said, oh, my kid won't finish all of his problems. He's fighting me on this math sheet and doing all the problems. And a couple of them were teachers. In California, shockingly, it's actually pretty easy to homeschool, although they try to stop it every year. And it's kind of like a charter school. So you have an assigned teacher once a month that'll check in with you. They give you curriculum, they give you funding, all this stuff. And so some of those teachers are homeschool moms themselves. And she's like, why are you having him do the whole page? I'm like, I don't know, because it's a whole page. Well, does he understand the material? I'm like, yeah. And my kids' math came very easy for them, which math is most families' nightmare. Send them to me. I love it. I make it fun. And she said, well, then don't make them do the whole sheet. If they can show competence, don't. That was the most freeing thing that could have been said to me. And if I would not have found a homeschool community, not just for my children, but for myself, I would not have known that. I would have thought I had to do it the way I did it in school. You go home, you do the whole sheet, right? You do the whole sheet. Obviously, math and repetition is a very good thing. But if you already know it, why do you need to do 20 problems of it? You probably don't. And so slowly from that group, actually, we ended up with a co-op. We ended up with about 14 kids that ranged. There was a 4-grade range. And we did a variety of subjects together, different parents that had different passions about things. We would do field trips. We would camp together. 70% of those kids are Eagle Scouts now because they made it available to girls. And so we all led, it was such a rich, amazing education for my children because I was also willing to get uncomfortable. And there are other parents out there like you that want the same thing. You may want homeschooling to look completely different than me, and that is okay. You need to do what can fit for your family and your child, or you're not going to be successful in it. And then COVID happened. So I want to back up to the social thing real quick. I only committed to the one social thing because I knew I would commit to too much. So about halfway through the year, as I kind of had it worked out and what was doing, then we started saying yes to different field trips and things with this little group that would meet at the park once a week. and there were probably 50 kids that would show up sometimes. So, you kind of get your people, and some things I could go to, some I wouldn't. And then from there, I slowly started saying yes to things. And guess what? It wasn't 4 days a week that we're always sitting down doing academics. My kids love to ski and snowboard. We lived very close to the slopes. And so it got to the point sometimes like, yeah, we'll go ski, but you have to do math and English in the car. Okay, no problem, Mom. And then guess what? All their friends would be up there on the slopes. I mean, that does not suck, which means I got to ski too. Your children will do what you do. What you care about, your children will care about, right? So when COVID happened, so much came to a screeching halt. So I just want to reiterate, if you feel like you experienced homeschooling during COVID because you were forced to teach your children while they were home and the school system was telling you what to do, I promise you, that was not homeschooling. That was like purgatory. That is not homeschooling. Homeschooling is when you design what works for your child and your family to teach them and give them a deep education. Most of the schools did not adapt well during COVID and did a huge disservice to our kids. Huge. Most kids did very poor under a video screen structure. There are a few, especially if they're differently wired, that I know that did really, really well. Like autism, Asperger's, they just thrived with this structure. But most kids did not, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it in college admissions, SAT tests, maturity. It's been really, really hard. And also it depends where in the country you lived. Where we lived, that was the school system for a year and a half, completely shut down. It was all video. And where we live now, they were shut down for 3 weeks. So within the same country, and depending where you are in the world, it could have been night and day. But I want to tell you, that is not homeschool. That is torture. That's torture. So what does the data say about homeschooling? So this is an article from the Washington Post in October of 2023. The data in fall of 2021, so just a little bit after COVID, things started less lockdown, right? There were about 2.7 million homeschool students in the United States. I have heard, because that's data that's 2.5 years old, it's almost 5 million right now. The Catholic school system, the private Catholic school system, has 1.7 million students. So homeschoolers are now 3 times that. And it continues to grow. The numbers are like this. Since COVID happened, parents are like, we're not doing this. We've seen it. It's not happening. And the charter schools in the United States are at 3.7 million students as of fall of 2021. And I will tell you, I love charters. I love charters. I think if you give parents choice, I love the school voucher concept. A lot of states do that. It is so helpful. And you know what? The public school will adapt. Competition is always a good thing. People always become better when there is competition. And so I love that there are so many different types of alternative schools because we all learn different, right? There is a really great resource that I want to recommend to you, HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I think it's $120 a year to be a member. If you do decide to homeschool, you want to join that. They give you a ton of free resources. And then if you ever have a legal issue, they will defend and protect you. It is legal in all 50 states of the United States to homeschool. Some states, it's so easy, you don't do anything. Some are very strict and stringent requirements. You need to know that to do it the right way. Yes, you can pull your child out at any time. You do not have to wait till the end of the year. Your public school, your private school is probably not telling you the truth on what that is. It's usually a simple form to pull your child. HSLDA will help you with that. I have called them for help with high school, what to do, college transcripts, how to get them in, all that kind of stuff. By the way, when we did test our kids annually at the end of the year, they were each 3.5 grades above. You guys, it's not because I'm an amazing teacher. It's not because my kids are brilliant. They are smart. I love my children. It's because we were connected and they felt loved. The reason that we homeschooled was for the youngest one. Probably for the first 2 months that we homeschooled, he would ask every single day to go back. He wanted to be with his friends. He just wanted to socialize, which was probably why he was getting in trouble. He wanted to socialize. And I told him, no, it's not what's best for him. And that was really hard. It was really hard as a mama to look in this sweet little child and say no. And then he stopped asking. And then by the end of that school year, he said, I don't ever want to go back there. This is so much better. In a 7-year-old's way, he was saying, he started telling me some of the things that administration had said to him and teachers and how he felt. And when he realized he had a friendship community that wasn't dependent on who he sat next to in class, he loved it. And by the way, we had many, many other families that ended up joining us in homeschooling because of that. The older, who was in 2nd grade, he's a stoic child. Before the end of the year, he would tell me 20 times a day, I love you, Mom. I love you, Mom. It made him much more tender in a good way and closer to me. And I can say today, they are 17 and 16, and they tower over me. And without hesitation, they will tell me, I love you, Mom. They will come and hug me. They want me to hang out with them and their friends. I give them their space and their freedom. I don't mean that, but we are close. I am so grateful. They come to me with all kinds of things. I want them to know that they can always come to me. I have watched them be entrepreneurs and start businesses. I have watched them say, this level of schoolwork is too much. I have watched them draw for notes. I have watched them both Eagle Scout at a very young age. I have watched them both lead. I've watched them have hard and fail. But I was always there, and so was my husband, to nurture and to encourage them, right? Our job is to help them thrive as adults and to know the Lord and not leave it as adults. I can't think of any better way to do that than to homeschool them. Why would you want to let someone else formulate the character of your child? You wouldn't. Even the most amazing person. It's not you. Don't you want it to be you? Find a village. Find a village. Our kids are capable of so much more. So much more. I even found that in the curriculum, especially the Bible curriculum. I threw a lot of it out, although I do have some good resources now. Kids are deep. Kids are a lot deeper than we let them act a lot of times. They will rise to leadership if you give them that opportunity. So I want to encourage you, Mom and Dad. You know your child better than anyone else. You are beyond capable of this, and you can do it. Also, as they got older, there's kind of 3 different ways of teaching, especially when they're younger. You are teaching down to them. You know that material. And then as they start to mature, you sort of start to learn side by side. And then you get to the point where they're almost teaching you. I had that last year with physics. You only have to be 1 step ahead of them. And I'd even say when I taught them advanced physics last year, I don't totally understand this. Let's dig in. And they'd both get up, because we usually project it on the TV in our living room. That's what we do. And they'd be like, oh, look, and let's pull up this YouTube, Mom, and I can show you. And did you know this thing? And then we'd go do an experiment. My goal for them is to have a curiosity for learning. If they are curious at learning, they will always be able to figure it out and be successful. Sadly, I have seen so many kids in the traditional system that hate learning. They don't like schooling because so much of the homework is pointless. I don't know why they're doing it. What is it teaching them? The success rate of homeschool kids in college is so high because they are curious, because they're not burnt out on education. And I can tell you, I'll probably do some social media posts about this. My children are turning out just fine. The senior has gotten in exactly where he wanted for college with early admission. You are not going to mess them up. I promise you. Even if you do it all wrong and you decide this curriculum's horrible, which we've done, we're not using this, and you throw it out the window and you start over, They are going to learn far more being with you and around you than just sitting and filling out worksheets. Go do this. I'm proud of you. You are capable.
I hope that today's podcast was a blessing to you. We appreciate you over here at Live Your Life Out Loud. If you could go follow us, share this podcast, and give us a review, it would greatly help us get the word out. Have a wonderful week.